It's high summer in northern Chile. Chinchorro Beach is popular with both locals and visitors from Peru and Argentina. But for archaeologists, this beach is famous for giving its name to one of South America's most amazing discoveries, the world's oldest mummies. They were found near the city of Arica in northern Chile, on the bluffs overlooking Chinchorro Beach, when a local water company was installing new pipes. Whole families of mummies, lying only a few inches under the sand. Mummies with black molded faces, mouths sometimes open as if in a silent scream. When the archaeologists reached the site, they were astonished by the numbers of mummies, some 96 in all, men, women, and children, and astonished by the elaborate burial preparation for what seemed to be just ordinary people in the community. In every other culture, mummification was a practice reserved for elite kings and priests. Vivien Standen, a local archaeologist, was called in to excavate the mummies and unravel the mystery of who the mummies were. Individual mummies had been found sporadically along the Chilean coast for decades, but the size of this group and its superb preservation were unique, and Vivien and her colleagues started asking questions. Who were these people, and how long had they been living on this arid coast? When radiocarbon dates were obtained from the bones, the results were astounding. This is the world's oldest mummy. When the pharaoh Tutankhamun ruled in Egypt, it had already been in the ground for 5,000 years. No one had dreamed that such elaborately prepared mummies could be so old. How had the Chinchorro managed to mummify their dead so long ago? Vivien Standen has studied their techniques in detail.
En este caso estamos frente a una típica momia de las llamadas.
Here we have a typical mummy, and they prepare them in the following way.
Una vez que fallecía el individuo,
First of all, once the individual died, he was skinned. They completely removed his skin, like a glove or a stocking.
todo lo que era órganos blandos, todo lo que era musculatura,
They removed all the soft organs, all the muscles, heart, lungs, and intestines, and they left the skeleton completely clean.
The next step for the mummy maker was to reassemble the bones in the correct anatomical order, tying them together with cords and reinforcing them with wood.
que se alcanza a visualizar acá. Todo esto es la estera
They would tie the bones to these pieces of wood, which they placed parallel to the large bones.
con estos maderos que disponían para
And they inserted sticks to reinforce the backbone right up through the base of the skull.
y que perforaba por el foramen magnum hasta el cráneo.
All this was carried out with the intention of making the bones and the skeleton rigid.
Hueso, la estructura ósea armada.
After they had secured the bones with wood, they would then model the body. That is to say, they practically transformed the body into a sculpture.
Una escultura. Lo modelaban con esta arcilla de color blanco.
They modeled it with this white clay, once again giving a lifelike shape to the individual.
A colocar a modo de una panty,
And finally, they would replace the skin, rolling it back onto the body almost like a stocking.
proceso, con una pátina de pintura.
The process was completed with a layer of black paint made of manganese. For this reason, they are known as black mummies.
Separando la región facial de la craneana.
In some cases, the skull was cut in two, separating the facial region from the rest. The brain was extracted, and the skull cavity was filled with llama wool, plant fiber, bird feathers, or bits of sea creatures, and so on.
Then the mummy makers would fit the two halves of the skull back together again, model the face with clay, and sometimes skillfully replace the original skin, leaving slits for the eyes and mouth.
las señalaban con incisiones horizontales.
In the case of babies and children, the mouth was usually shaped as if it was open. On top of the skull, they would fix a scalp complete with hair, in most cases, probably the original scalp of the dead person. In later mummies, more elaborate wigs were created.
The other interesting point is that they used to remodel the genitals. Here we clearly have the male genitals reshaped, and in the females, they also reshaped the breasts. And so it was practically transformed into a sculpture.
So where had the ancient mummy makers come from? Their ancestors were probably hunters in the high Andes, who around 10,000 years ago were probably forced by drought to seek new food sources lower down the coast. They left reminders of their presence in rock shelters as each generation sought a more prosperous life. They probably made seasonal trips from the mountains, following the rivers that cut their way toward the Pacific. Like their modern-day successors, the ancient Chinchorro people were expert at harvesting the sea. Analysis of the mummy bones show them to be rich in nitrogen and other elements indicating that most of their food came from the ocean. Among the few simple items buried with the mummies are fish nets and fish hooks, all reflecting their dependence on the sea. We know that, just like today, fishing was carried out exclusively by men. 1/5 of all male adult skulls and no female show the effect of constant work in cold water. This is a normal human skull. And this is one of the Chinchorro skulls, the air passage all but blocked by bony growths caused by exposure to cold water. The ancient mummies have other stories to tell about the lives of their long-vanished owners. Their fish diet certainly kept their teeth in good shape. Low sugar intake meant no cavities, though their sand-gritty diet did grind their molars flat. The bones of Chinchorro women are also revealing. Nearly 1/3 of all the adult women suffered from osteoporosis, a weakening of the bones probably caused by constant childbirth and its demands on the body's calcium. But why should the Chinchorro be the first people on Earth to mummify their dead? One clue is that nearly 1/4 of the mummies are of children who died around the age of 1. And those children who did survive the first year lived on a dangerous coast. This particular beach, with its treacherous cross currents, claims several lives each year. Perhaps, traumatized by the loss of their most precious possessions, the Chinchorro mummified to prolong the memory of their departed. And once they'd made the mummy, what role did it play in their lives? Some mummies show signs of being repaired many times. Were the mummies stored in a special place where ceremonial offerings were presented to them over a period of weeks or months? Or could the Chinchorro have even lived with their dead relatives in their own houses for a while before finally burying them in the sand? Today, the mummies of Chinchorro are in greater danger than at any time in their long history. The facilities at the Research Institute where they are stored are stretched to the limit, with no funds for air conditioning or proper climate control. Mummies that survived 8,000 years in the ground are visibly rotting away. Overheated in summer, damp in winter, their future is in grave doubt. The Chinchorro were the world's first mummy makers and were the only culture in the world to mummify everyone in the community. But if nothing is done to save their precious legacy, it may soon crumble away into dust.